Psalm 127:3. Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from Him. This suggests children are a precious gift from God to be valued and cared for.
In the United States, a child a minute is taken into DHS, CPS, and so on custody. The reality is their picks are already selected, you just don't know it. Being perfect no longer matters. It's what the adopting families are looking for.
Who is it stealing the children, you ask?
From caseworker to the White House, the buck stops at all levels, just not where it is supposed to be. The services your family needs, we the people have paid for to ensure your reunification. Title 4 says, reunify at all costs. United, we stand means nothing to us when it comes to family values. Children are being ripped away from their families. Parents are reverting to addictive behaviors to cover the pain. The trauma caused by child removal is just being recognized, and the results are atrocious. Termination of parental rights is not healthy for anyone, just profitable for the people enforcing the lie.
It's time Washington listens to the cries of our children, the wails of their mothers, and the rage growing in the fathers. These are our children. Keep your damn hands off them. We are coming to act on the behalf of the children God gave us to protect, and you kidnapped.
Trafficking and selling our children. The corruption may start with the caseworker, but goes through the judicial system, passing the governor through the Senate and into the White House. The entire system has a hand in the business known as CPS.
Our children are stolen every minute of a 24-hour day. They are being robbed of their innocence, their trust, their happiness. As parents, we are isolated and betrayed by a government we trust. States are balancing budgets on kids' lives. Only 12% of the kids taken will be reunified. Title 4 funding is being riveted with fraud.
We need to stop CPS and abolish CPUFist.com is leading the way. Join us.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday night CPS Victims Hunting for Justice. I am your host, the CPS Punisher. Tonight, people, first and foremost, thank you guys for being here. And I just we don't say this enough because we're so engulfed in all the information and all of the stuff that we're talking about. But what I need to tell you is you need to, if you please, if we want to keep this show going and we need to keep and spread the word about this show, I need you guys to please like, subscribe. If you will, put in the chat, put the state that you're from. That way we know where you're from when we're talking. That helps us out tremendously too. These little things that take very little time on your part mean a great deal to us in our part, and I want to thank you guys for helping us. I mean, we need all of us to be together, and we need all of us to group together so we can show these people that we mean business, because there's not just 1 or 2 or 50 of us. There's thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions. That's the only way we're going to get to the top. So please, guys, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Leave a comment underneath. Make sure, because how if you are a follower of us, we don't necessarily start at the 9:15, 9:20 time where we say we're going to start. So if you hit the notification button, it will always come on for you, so you don't have to sit around and wait for us. I don't want you to, you get up, make a sandwich, do whatever you guys got to do while you're doing this. But again, thank you all for being here with us and helping us with this fight. Now, with that being said, talking about this fight, we're very privileged at this point now. We've gotten to a new level in this show, and we're thankful for our new on board gentleman here, because the number one thing that we are missing in all of this stuff is a lawyer that is willing to work outside of the box of the CPS and this judicial system that we're using. I'm not saying he's willing to work outside of the box of the law, because what this man does is inside of the realms of the law and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and things like that. He's not going to put up with the hanky-panky contract laws and the things that CPS is trying to get involved in. So CPS comes to your door, like we always say, don't answer it, tell them to come back with a warrant. But the next piece of that puzzle is get yourself a lawyer. And we're fortunate enough tonight to have Mr. Charles Lincoln. I'm pretty sure that he's going to be on board with us on the norm, not every day, but from what I'm gathering, he is going to be here with us. Feel free to put some questions up in the chat if you guys have some for him. I'm sure he'd be willing to, as we always do, discuss and answer and all of that. But to end this introduction, I'm going to bring Melissa in, and let's see what we got going on. How we doing, guys?
Well, this is the time I heard your introduction. I've been late both times before, and I just wanted to congratulate you. You start with Christ's cross, and you go on through many scenes that are very, very true true depictions of the crisis. And the thought occurred to me as I was watching your introduction, at the scene where you have a baby in a hospital, a baby alone, basically. The thought crossed my mind, the only way that the government wants to collaborate in the abolition of CPS is once the family is completely destroyed and all children are basically born into what was prophetically called by Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, the hatchery.
Yeah.
Once a family is gone, all children will be born in an institutional environment. Once the technology exists to make that happen, and parents and parental guidance and the individuality of people and the family will be gone. It will be erased, and everyone will be an automaton conditioned to serve the state.
Yep.
That is the dream against us. And I mean, when you start off with Christ's cross and you show pictures of veterans and people protesting, you are showing the greatness that of the American dream. And the American dream is very close to death right now.
Right, and we have to. It's very critical that we keep that dream alive. I mean, even so much as the imagery of the white picket fence and the dog and the mom and the dad and the front porch, and Old Town America, all of these things we need to keep in people's minds and remind them. Everybody goes, Darren, you're playing this stuff awful long, but it's exactly for the purpose of what you said. I need to remind everybody of what America was, what it could be, and what it should be, and keep that image, because that image is dying. And, these generations now, they've taken the Civil War away from us. They've taken all of these things that they're slowly, people are paying attention, but they're removing our history from us. And, no one's even paying attention to this. And we can't allow what America was not only based on, fought for, and then everything else that's gone along with it. Even apple pie and hot dogs. I mean, we got to keep this vision alive because all of these people, all of these people that have lost their lives in these conflicts and all of these different epidemics and all of this stuff, the Americans that have died, they didn't die so that they could kidnap our kids. That's the one thing that I'm sure of. There's, without a doubt, no soldier ever died, in combat or any of that and said, wow, I fought so that CPS could take these people's children, So that in itself.
I hate to say it, the soldiers may not have realized that was the agenda, but in World War One, in World War Two, in the Korean and Vietnam wars, that was part of the agenda. These wars served to slaughter large parts of the reproductive population who would otherwise be tending farms, creating new businesses, innovating, doing scientific innovation. It's culling. The Vietnam War, I think, in particular, we see that basically people were sent to die for no reason in a war that had little or no reason to it, and it was specifically designed to weaken families, weaken communities, and I mean, ironically, I guess some people will realize this, not many people do. Vietnam was our most deadly war, and that's why there's the Vietnam Memorial in Washington. I mean, it wasn't as deadly as World War II for the Europeans, or as deadly but for the American population, the 50 plus thousand who died in Vietnam were a terrible loss, and that was part of the program of the Johnson administration to promote welfare and to weaken the community and the family.
That's what
it's hard to say that because we're taught to, we used to be taught to admire our leaders, and maybe it's a sign of progress that we don't admire them quite so much anymore. But people have to have ideals. That's why I like the fact that you open with Christ's cross. I mean, I salute you for starting the values in the right place.
Wow, well, thank you. People don't ever think about what you just said there, and I'll be honest, I didn't. But then the light bulb just went off in my head, so I hope you didn't see that smoke. But wars. You're right. They say war's great for the economy. We're going to get these industry, the industrial unit going. We're going to do all this. But what is the number one thing that war creates? Fatherless children. You figure. I wonder, what the amount of children that are born when men go to war, especially like back in those days, because it was a big war, it was a rallied event. Now they're going at staggered times. It's not like, these units. I love these guys tremendously. I come from a family of them, but they, they don't have the glorious send-offs like they used to, like World War II, like you're talking about. And even in Vietnam, they did, even though it was an oppressed at the beginning and things like that. But the thing is these guys, it would be like nothing. They know that they're leaving. They're going to have a couple good nights with their wives before they leave. And a lot of these women were, these men go to war, they die, and now they leave a woman with a child at home, and they're you're absolutely right. They're thrown into the system because the military doesn't take care of them any longer because their husbands are not there. So they're kind of bounced out. That's what happened to my aunt. She thought she would be fine when her husband died in Vietnam, but that didn't happen. He passed away, and it was that original thing. But then she was left to be a single mom, with the child, and then
we've also got to understand that the United States is not in any sense an isolated phenomenon. We are part of a pattern that was basically created in Europe, and the purpose of World War I and II was to destroy traditional society in Europe, and it did. In England, in France, in Germany, as much as 1/3 of the men of marriageable age were wiped out. In Germany at the end of World War II, you basically had close to half the men of marriageable age being wiped out. And what was the result? The result was the transformation of the entire European continent, where the church, the family, the traditions of countless thousands of years in Europe were wiped out. As recently as the early 20th century, James G. Fraser, in his study of comparative mythology, commented on the huge number of pre-Christian traditions that had survived in Europe up until the early 20th century. Those are all gone now because of the huge dislocation of society. You talk about we lost the Civil War in the past 15, 20 years. Well, Europe in the past 100 years has lost basically all of its history except in libraries.
Right. So do you think that this became something that was watched and it was a model? Because, we know that Europe, CPS wasn't CPS, but it came, this has been going on from the 1600s. They record this stuff, this child trafficking and stealing of the children and all of that. It goes way back. But do you think, because the number one thing that DHS does, or CPS, or whatever you call them, DCYF, the number one thing that they do when they come in is, first of all, they look to the husband to see if he's abusive. They look to the man to see what kind of damage that he puts forth so that they can remove him from the home. They want to take the man out. I mean, they're called the Division of Family Services, right? It says it right in in their words there. It's Division of Family Services. It's not reunification of family services. But the first thing they do is, even if the husband is whatever, well, your husband's going to have to leave, if you want to sign the safety plan. This happens over and over and over again. Now, listen, single mothers are the strongest mammal on this planet. You're not going to tell me any different. I would put a single mom up against a male of some, I can't even tell you what I would, because these creatures, not only do they build these children themselves, grow them, birth them, and all of this, but then when they're left alone to take care of them themselves, no matter what happens, no matter what the cost, they get it done, right? So I'm not saying anything in the fact that a woman can't take care of a child on its own, nor a man, but together is what has created this child, and together is what a child needs to grow and get all of its ducks in a row so its life can be prosperous and heartfelt and move forward and do well in life. They're showing that these single family homes, the kids fall apart. The single family homes produced by DHS, the kids are falling apart. These single family homes that DHS produces are causing alcoholics, they're causing drug addicts, the same people they're removing them. So where does that model to remove the father and the strong man, other than basic common sense? But does that play a role in history? Like, where do they start to say, I bet if we break them up, this gets
men,
a little easier?
Men are the entire male physiognomy and character is based on being a warrior, but not a warrior for a state, a warrior for his home, for his family. That our genetic makeup is all about protecting and producing for the home. And so, yes, if you remove the male, why do single families have so much trouble? It's for economic reasons. The simple reality is that one parent cannot both raise children and produce a great income.
Right.
Those are both full-time occupations.
Absolutely.
They've been for full-time occupations from the beginning of time. Human babies require much more long-term care than the babies of any other species. A puppy might be able to survive on its own at 3 to 6 months, definitely by a year. Human babies will die, and so it's part of our evolution is to divide the roles and to have complementary roles. And women are the warriors who keep the species alive. Men are the warriors who keep the women alive. And whenever you have a woman who has to go out and support her children, or give up her autonomy to the welfare system, basically what you've done is you have changed that equation tremendously, and she is going to be dependent on other people who are not family to take care of the children if she's the bread earner, or she's going to be on welfare if she is not the breadwinner, and the fathers basically are left to be irrelevant. They are, as you said, no matter what the facts of a family situation are, they will first look suspiciously at the male, even if the male is the complaining party, even if the male is saying that, mama did something wrong to the children. They won't want to attack the woman. They will want to make sure that the male is the object. And the interesting twist on that is that sometimes when a female is being protective and playing the male role of trying to protect her children, say, from a genuinely predatory man, they will say that she's unfit. A case in Texas that eats at my mind over the years was the case of a woman whose son recorded his father basically being drunk and abusive and threatening, and she took this recording to CPS and the court, and they put the mother in jail for allowing this recording to take place. Anytime you show independence, anytime you show that you're willing to take care of things yourself, they destroy you, because only the state should be setting the rules. Only the government. And I mean, yeah, it is basically a combined program of war, of social war, and war to create social problems.
Right. Now, you say we know that this is going on, but let's talk about regulations, policies, contracts. Let's talk about these things. Like, we know that they attacked the man. We know that they withdraw that. They know that we know that that's part of it. And then the next thing is they got to sucker you in somehow, right? They got to get you to agree to something. They got to get a way to make this thing stick, right? What are they doing? What's the ways? Let's just talk about that. Like, what do we got to defend ourselves with constitutionally over that? Is Constitution even allowed to be used in these situations? Like, what do we have to do with that type of those situations, with them engaging with us?
Well, as I made this point, I think the first night I was here with Connie, I think that the biggest problem we've got is that the Constitution was written to prevent government intervention in family life, not to promote it. And yet the instincts of the bankers and the people who wanted to maximize government power, they recognized fairly early on that only by invading the home can you break society down. And so the First Amendment, I want to repeat the thing I said the first night. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or restricting the free exercise thereof. And the modern courts have been focusing on public school prayer and, prayer at football games, issues like that, and saying that those behaviors are the threat to separation of church and state. At the same time that all that litigation is going on, they are actually empowering the government to invade spheres that were in 1776, even 1788, entirely left to the church, people's religion, or to courts of equity. And and for wealthier people, there were what were known as marital contracts. When people actually did have property, and the government, the institutional intervention in family life was very limited at that point. And so, one of the first things they did was start transforming the marriage license from a religious thing to a state thing. They changed baptism from a church thing to a public registry of births. And then, as I mentioned last night, I think, the biggest original welfare program began in Prussia in the late 18th, early 20th, early 19th century, rather, around the time of Napoleon. Prussia instituted mandatory compulsory school education. And this was a major step towards homogenization of the population. But as in terms of the contract, well, Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence wrote, governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. But that's like several things Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence. That's a little bit overly idealistic. Governments derive most of their power, maybe all of their power, from the consent of the governed. And that's why it is so important to have, institutions which create contracts. And one of the major institutions that creates contracts, of course, is the banking industry. The banking industry that says, you've got to have money to be really wealthy, and it's not enough to have land and produce everything you need. So you basically need us to extend credit and to permit you to do things indirectly. And in order to do things indirectly, you have to start writing contracts. And credit is the basis of all forms of welfare, whether it be Social Security or CPS. Everything requires a contract. Social Security is a contract. Most people sign on to it without ever thinking that it's a contract. It is a contract. It's very difficult to extricate yourself from that system, and so basically your question is like basically the cancerous. If you think of the tentacles of all the different ways in which money and banking permeate the legal system, and all the different ways that enriching the bankers in the banking system. Hi, Melissa. We're finally get to see you. I've never seen you before tonight. Hello there. And it's good to know who I'm talking to. And anyhow, I don't even know where to begin on this, other than to say that the banking system, the taxation system, and the welfare system are like a triangular. We talk about the three parts of government being the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. I say that the real three parts of government are the banks, the taxation, and the welfare.
Yeah, I don't want to jump ahead on that, but I want to bring up this point to you. Where is that triangle of government when we're in the courtroom with CPS? There is no checks and balances while we're in that courtroom with CPS, because you don't have a person against you. You have a guardian ad litem, okay, but then you have a prosecutor, you have a caseworker, and you have a judge, all three working for the entity that is taking your child. How is that even remotely fair to the parents when they're in this courtroom? Like that is selfish.
I mean, I'm just curious. How is that different from, in effect, the criminal laws?
Well, first of all, the state of Maine itself, the entity itself, isn't there to represent themselves. So now you have a representative of the state in all positions that are against you. When in fact, an attorney general, like they're supposed to, in part, be for the people, right? Like they're supposed to.
Well, but I mean, think about again. Just compare that to the structure of a criminal court. You have the judge, you have the prosecutor, and you have perhaps an allegedly private attorney who is in fact a member of a society that is controlled by the judges themselves. I wanted to talk a little bit about the bar, and maybe this is a good place to go into that. The bar is the ultimate subversion of the three-part system of government, because the bar basically provides a monopoly to which members of the legislature, members of the executive, and members of the judiciary typically all belong. I mean, so this society, which is basically a society of control of behavior control, thought control, and policy control. You cannot be. It's very difficult to propose any new ideas if you're a lawyer, because you'll end up like me. You will end up being disbarred if you don't support the system. And this is a terrible threat because the lawyers depend on their income from this close relationship that they develop with the judge. There are a million jokes about it. A good lawyer knows the law. A great lawyer knows the judge.
Yeah, right.
Well, then that must be a plus for me because at our last hearing, when we got the continuation, I was supposed to introduce one of my attorneys to a friend of mine who needed criminal defense. And after an hour and a half of waiting, he says, "I'm sorry, just send me the court date. I'll be there. They can pay me."
She'll be there, and then they shut her down.
We lost her.
She's out.
Melissa, I don't know where that was going. I'd be interested to see where it was going, but the bottom line is that lawyers depend on the judges, and judges control the lawyers on both sides of a criminal case, and so the CPS situation is not that different. The bar is the great conforming institution. Melissa, where were you? I couldn't tell where you were going.
One of my attorneys ended up having an hour and a half lunch with the judge at the judge's dollar.
At the judge's house?
No, the judge's dollar. The judge invited my attorney out to dinner. They went out for lunch.
Who paid?
Everybody, if you guys are watching,
The judge paid. That's why I say I got a good start on that. The judge bought my attorney lunch.
Yeah,
that's really
that on TV too much. If anybody's watching, if you guys have questions that you would like to throw at Charles, there's chats right here on the side. If you're watching YouTube, if you're watching whatever, go ahead and throw them up there. I'm sure he wouldn't mind answering a couple of those. And don't forget, you guys, I'm going to pound this in because my wife pounds it into me to tell you guys, make sure you like and subscribe. Charles, what do you feel about the way that CPS is being handled, how it's being handled in the courtroom with these public attorneys or the public pretenders or any of these things? Like, what do you see going on? I'm sitting on the outside right now because, like you said, you've been disbarred because you're a
There's
new
a
lawyer.
standard for judges and CPS, which means as close to absolutely nothing as any standard could be. You know what that standard is?
What's that?
It's called both the judges in family court and CPS should always work for the best interest of the child. I mean, how is that a standard at all? If you believe that any two people will ever have exactly the same concept of what is best, you haven't been around people very long. And so basically, when you have a legal standard like best interest of the child, what you mean is that the judges and CPS and the members of the bar generally can do whatever they want. And that means that there is no law. There is no law. There is no law at all because the judge and the attorneys, including the attorneys for, or caseworkers for CPS, they can define the outcome in order to benefit themselves, and nobody can say no, because they all agree that whatever outcome they come up with is in the best interest of the child. And as long as they all agree with that, then they have followed the law, so to speak. And it's a travesty. It's a travesty when you've got a legal standard that basically is no standard at all. Then there is no law. It is chaos, and basically that is what we see in the family courts. We see that people are. I have this image of people are basically like being blown around like candles in the wind.
Yes, for sure.
The flame goes whichever way the biggest blowhard lawyer or judge or CPS worker wants to blow. And I noticed that Herbert asked this question. Levittown for World War II soldier. Ask Charles who that was for. I don't quite understand where we'd be going with that question, but Levittown, of course, was basically one of the first mass-produced, standardized suburbs. And did it have any connection with the banking system? Certainly did. Did it have any connection with the post-World War II adaptation of, adaptation to civilian life? Yes, but I'm not sure what it has to do with what we're talking about here. I'm not sure at all, but yes, the development of the suburbs was clearly related to the breakdown of autonomy. The bringing people in from the farms. Farmers are free people because to a great extent, a farmer can live without cash.
Right, because they feed themselves and all of that. Right, they're self-sufficient.
They can use. They might need a few iron tools, and they might need cash for that. But the amount of
bartering power and everything.
The family, of course, was critical to farm living.
Right.
And, the children
help. Let me ask you this. I don't even know this answer, but it's funny that you just said that. Do we see a lot of farm and farmers being attacked by CPS? I don't have an answer for that. I'm just asking you.
The answer might be no. One is that the family farm is almost extinct.
Right. Well, that being said, right.
Farms. And again, that concept also. I mean, I may start to sound like a broken record, but the origin of industrial farming also traces back to the February 1848 Communist Manifesto. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels discussed about the need to create industrial armies, especially in the field of agriculture. They totally wanted to abolish the concept of farm living, and especially of the individual family or extended family farm and community. And I think these are fabulously important concepts that we've got to realize. And I mean, I think that one thing you're saying is that perhaps in family farms, the family simply wouldn't break up as readily as in the modern state. We got Melissa back.
Well, in our area, we still have a lot of family farms. No, they ain't the 3,000 acres they used to be, but they're still 300-acre farms. And the system actually, I find, plagues those families more because typically they're white families.
Okay.
They're non-damaged kids. They're polite kids. They know how to respect people, and they are more plagued because they teach your kid a sense of responsibility. And I think a lot of it with the division of family and everything is aimed at Title IV funding. I mean, I know upon my research into Title IV funding that in divorce cases where you're dealing with child support and just a separation of household, not even a state case to where a non-CPS case, they still try to break down the amount of time that the breadwinner has the child to a 24% because they still maximize the largest amount of funding of Title IV funding, just like the when CPS takes the kids, the Title IV funding. So I think the division of family is hugely sought after for its income, whether it's through divorce with child support or whether it's through CPS. I mean, that's just my opinion of it, but our farm families here in this area are highly plagued by the system.
Well, that's interesting. I'm curious. Have you observed enough through time to see what happens to the family farms after the intervention of CPS?
A lot of times they'll go a couple years before they get back on track.
If they ever recover, right?
Do they manage?
Yeah, because they love their families, and once you break that family bond, they just, it destroys them. It destroys a father for what he is. I mean, Darren, you could have conquered the world before they took your daughter. And then afterwards, you didn't want to get out of bed.
Right. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. They take
most families with farms nowadays, because the economics are so bad, are struggling to survive. Now, when you turn around and retain an attorney, because we know the public defenders, or public pretenders as we call them, don't really give a shit to save the family. They're making $50 an hour. They don't want to do a good job for that. So you got to retain a private attorney. And it's open season on pricing. They want $25,000 to $50,000 up front. That is enough to bankrupt the farm and force them into foreclosure. I know several families here in the area that kind of thing has happened to.
Well, I mean, that certainly would be part of the program then, because the abolition of family autonomy, family businesses, the corporatization of every industry mandates that individuals work for corporations, which are basically aspects of the government.
Yeah, no, they're stealing the farmers' lands after they're going bankrupt, and they're selling the soil to China. No joke, they're loading the soil up in containers and sending it overseas and stripping the mineral rich stuff out of our lands after they steal our lands. I know currently 20, I think it was like 23 or 24% of Alabama is actually owned by Chinese. And you'll find that it's pretty similar in most states.
No. I mean, in Louisiana, we have the Chinese, and then we also have Bill Gates, who's like a surrogate, an honorary Chinaman.
Well,
somebody
at least he currently can't live forever.
Well, but his institutions and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation basically will. It even survives their divorce.
Right. You know, the biggest thing I worry about, with our families, with the way they strip our kids, because if you get 500,000 kids removed a year, only 30% of it due to abuse and neglect. So you've got 70% that
breaking up really bad. You're breaking up really badly. I cannot.
Can you hear me better now?
A few words at a time, yeah.
With all the kids being removed and not going home, when our older generation gets elderly, who's going to take care of them? Because I took care of my parents.
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, again, it means that the children are dependent on the state. Old folks are going to be dependent on the state. And basically, everybody is going to be cared for in institutions, not not by families. The whole idea is to atomize the individual, alienate the individual from all individuals from each other, and only the institution will survive.
Now, Charles, let's go. You hear a lot of talk about parents patriae.
I'm sorry, what?
About parents patriae, or how do you say that? Patriae. Parents patriae. Can you explain what it is to people and what it means, and is it legit? Is it a legit concern? Is that real that they say that this is a contract that you know at your birth this is the way the state has gained access to you, so they don't even need to contract you belong to the state?
Again,
very broad.
Yes, governments derive all their powers from the consent of the government, not just their just powers, but all their powers. Jefferson just got it a little bit too narrow there. And I mean, is the concept of parents patriae legitimate? I guess if there was if there was a mass disease that wiped out all the parents and only left children, you'd want someone to take care of the children. You don't want the children to starve. So the state could come in, I mean, and take care of these orphans. But I mean, here in New Orleans, some of the most elaborate and beautiful hotels and condominiums in the city are former orphanages. St. Vincent, St. Elizabeth's, just to name two of the really fanciest ones. These were created by private individuals and churches. And the beauty of the institutions that were created by private enterprise, basically, is so much greater than the institutional ugliness of public schools and public orphanages, which are basically like prison.
Well, right.
I mean, I think this is a very interesting topic. Is what whether there should. I mean, parens patriae was definitely not a big concept at the founding of this country. It was not a big country at the beginning of the 20th century. It is only a big concept now because everybody wants to be protected, and they basically want to be protected from each other, and they want they want safety and security. And as Benjamin Franklin says, a lot of people will recognize this quote: anyone who will give up their liberty for a little bit of security and safety will neither have nor deserve safety or liberty. And that's just reality. But people are intimidated. Herbert, how are you tonight?
Fine, Charles. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
I threw up a question. You brought it up. I don't know why I wasn't seeing, but I know we got a little bit off the beaten path. But you remember Levittown was developed for the World War II soldiers coming home, and there were Levittowns all over the place, right?
It was the very first sort of mass-produced suburban development,
and it was directed more towards the soldiers coming back from World War II.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't know that much about it, but where are you going with this?
All right, where I'm going with that is I'm introducing Jim Crow laws, segregation, the development of the Levittown, soldiers of color and white soldiers going to fight World War II, but when they come back to the United States, there's a division immediately.
Okay, I mean,
and then with that division, you have that, especially in the South with the Jim Crow laws, because believe me, I grew up with those laws. I may not look as old as I am, but I grew up with the Jim Crow laws. I remember them specifically.
And what I mean, I guess I'm not following the connection between Levittown and Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws.
People of color could not live in Levittown. Wasn't going to happen. But they went to the same war.
I did not know that Levittowns were all white. I mean, I simply didn't know that.
Yeah. Okay. If you look it up, even if Darren looks it up, you'll see that it wasn't allowed. You know about the Jim Crow laws, right? Jim Crow laws.
Yeah, I was going to say that those started evolving in the 1880s and 1890s after Reconstruction was over.
Right. So that put everybody in their little places, in their little cubby holes. I mean, with Jim Crow laws, people couldn't live amongst themselves together.
I'll throw out a little story about one of the most interesting fellows I ever met. His name was Jerron Ames. He lives in Upper East Side, New York. He's a black fellow. He's a black jazz pianist, and he has recreated in his Upper East Side condo a little place that it looks like it's in the French Quarter in New Orleans. And when I first met this gentleman, I'm like, "You miss home, don't you?" And he said, "Yes, I do." And I said, "Well, why are you living in New York? Why are you living on the Upper East Side? Instead of back in the French Quarter?" Because the walls were painted red. There were chandeliers. He had spent a great deal of money to recreate the atmosphere of the French Quarter.
Sounds like my studio.
Okay. And he explained to me why he couldn't go back to New Orleans. Well, I got to tell you, he said, I can't go back there because the New Orleans I lived in doesn't exist anymore. And I said, well, why not? And I said, I mean, I know it's changed. I know it's changed a great deal since I was an undergraduate at Tulane. But the story he told me totally blew my mind. It's very well known that New Orleans was a completely segregated city. And it's very well known that there was something called redlining, where normal banks would not finance within black areas. These are well-established historical facts. But what is not established is the corollary of that. Jerron Ames family ran the oldest black bank in Louisiana, the second oldest black bank in the United States. And they were destroyed by the Civil Rights Movement. They were absolutely put out of business by integration because their market was to finance black people in the black areas and to provide the opportunity for black families to have home ownership. And from the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement goal, there has been a decline, ironically enough, in black home ownership in the South as the urban populations become more and more dependent on the instability of welfare and a high-priced cash economy, or credit economy rather, because cash is much more fixed in price than credit. The reason we have this rampant inflation is because credit is very flexible, and you can constantly raise prices that way. So, I mean, there was an interesting thing. I mean, I mentioned at the outside, or actually before we started live, I was commenting on the fact that the Civil Rights Movement was in many ways a disaster for black people because the Civil Rights Movement, coupled with welfare in particular, because the Civil Rights Movement itself was dependent on cohesive black families and cohesive black communities. You probably couldn't have a civil rights movement comparable to the one in the 50s and 60s anymore because those communities have all been integrated out of existence. There is no cohesion anymore. Maybe, Herbert, maybe you know this statistic better than I do, but my understanding is that prior to the civil rights movement and the welfare explosion, 90% of black families, maybe 95%, were two-parent families. And now, in the aftermath of civil rights and the birth of the Great Society, Johnson's Great Society and the welfare state, it's down to like 30 to 40% of black families, and are nationwide are two-parent, and in some urban areas, way below that. So, I mean, the divide and conquer strategy of the government and the policy of atomizing individuals and alienating them from their families, it has been a disaster not only for white people but for black people. And I think that in a way, the black people have been more victimized by the promises made to them, the fraudulent promises made to them, than even white people. But basically, that is the new definition of equality. The new definition of equality is everyone must be dependent upon and subject to the whim of the government.
Okay. I'll buy that. So what can you account for what happened in, I believe it was Tulsa, Oklahoma, when we had Black Wall Street?
Well, that's before welfare, wasn't it?
Well, check this though. But listen, all of these things, they're all relevant to a degree. But if you look at the numbers, because I know where this is going, white people are still dominantly, their children are dominantly taken 2-1 to the black, to the Hispanic, and to the Philippines. So we can sit here and talk about this, but still the white people, the white families are the ones that are under attack by CPS by double.
I think I know. I think both. I think Darren. I think it's equal, black and white.
No,
Attacked by CPS.
Well, so I don't think it's equal, but
168,000 white children last year, 86,000 black children, 84,000 Hispanic children. That's the numbers that's come up with. So that's the numbers of the children that were taken and never returned home. And then it goes down to Filipino, and things like that. But the white family is the one that, whether you can talk segregation, you can talk all of these things, division and all this stuff, but the white family is completely under attack. And whether that's because the trafficking thing, because I don't believe, I'll tell you what, first and foremost, I don't believe that there's a minority in this country. If there's a minority in this country right now, it is the white person. These numbers that they are coming up with are not real whatsoever. This minority thing has gone down the pike a long time ago. It's just the way that they're collecting money.
Well, I think what you're saying is the new minority is going to be white people. The new minority, because of all the.
It's still 100. There's still double the amount of white children taken by CPS that there is black and Hispanic kids.
Yeah, I'll go with that. And but I'm just saying that I'm noticing with the getting back to CPS that a lot of cases I've noticed with CPS are amongst Caucasian or whites.
Right.
In black and Hispanic families, the babies, the children are usually taken in by grandma or by family.
Do you know what the percentage of black two-parent families is in the United States today? I feel like I was just talking off the top of my head here.
Do I know the percentage?
How many black families are still two-parent families these days?
I wouldn't say there's a whole lot, and I could also say there's not a whole lot of white families that have a full mommy, daddy, and children. It just seems like at some point, people are not even getting married anymore.
Correct. I mean, marriage itself, a couple could stay together even if they're not married.
Yeah.
But they, and part of and I mean, one of the points I was making before we started the live stream was that, in a way, the Great Society and welfare were aimed at the black family and aimed at social cohesion, because they rewarded black women for not being married by giving them higher benefits if they were single mothers.
So it goes. Let's see here. I have it right here. Where is it? Let's see. It's more than half, 51.2% of all black children live with one parent in 2022, compared with 1 in 5, 21.3% of white children. Let's see.
So twice as many black single parent families as white parents.
Right. So between 1980 and 2022, the proportion of children living in two-parent families declined for white youth to 82.7% to 75.6%, Hispanic youth 75.4% to 67.5%, and for black youth, the proportion of children living in two-parent families in 2022 is 43%, same as it was in 1980.
But how about going back further to the 1950s? Whatever you're looking at, does it go back any further than that?
1960. It's got 1960. Hold on a minute. 1960 to present. Okay, so that's on here. So I don't quite know how to read this map here.
Were they doing census back then?
Yeah, it says
we've been doing censuses since 1790.
Yeah, so this one, it doesn't have 19. This one that I'm reading does not have Well, maybe it will. Hold on, let me view the table here. It goes back to 1970. So, and that says the proportion of children living with their mothers in single parent households increased from 7.8% to 16.7% for white youth, 29.5% to 45% for black youth. And for children of Hispanic ethnicity, proportion living with their mother in a single parent household was 19.6% in 80 and then to 24.5. So that jumped somehow. There is, however, a OJJDP statistical briefing book online that's available, and it's got all of these stats in it that you can check out.
Are you are either of you familiar with the Moynihan report? Patrick Moynihan?
I am not.
You should look up the Moynihan report. Patrick J. Moynihan was a New York senator for many
Oh,
years.
here we go. I got it.
But
Yeah,
before that, he wrote in 1964, very critical year in the history of what we're talking about, the welfare system and civil rights movement. He wrote this study of the black family and basically predicted the collapse of the black family as a result of Johnson Great Society policy.
Wow.
And
so this just, I guess this makes sense. CPS is looking for, a little bit above lower class family, 2 parents, good kid with upbringing. They wanted, this makes sense. So it's funny that the amount of kids that are taken reflect the single parent. I mean, the 2 parent home. If you look at what I just said statistically with the numbers of the amount of kids that were taken in each ethnic group, and then you take that to the single and double parent homes, it's pretty much the same. The numbers are relative because you have 186,000 white kids, 84 or 86,000 black kids, 84,000 Hispanic kids, and that completely, they're going after 2 parent homes. So they are completely, they're destroying, they're trying to, this just proves it right here. They're just destroying any sort of, it's the demise of the family. That's what CPS is ultimately done.
106-year-old goal of communism is the destruction of the family, private property, and the so-called bourgeois state, the capitalist middle class. And that is, CPS is an integral part of that.
That's wild. That's crazy. I've never looked at it that way or thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. And you know what? Those statistics, people need to be used to help in educating these families, because what that tells me is, listen, if you're white, you need to pay attention what you're doing when you're having your children. If you are white, lower to middle class, watch out, because CPS is gunning for you. That's the reality of this.
I don't think it is not just white people, and it's not just the lower middle class. It is a general program. I mean, I know some very upper class white families.
Of course. I mean, ultimately it goes through the whole thing. But if you look at, again, you take those statistics and look who the 2 parent families are, they show that it's lower to middle class for the white people. I mean, this is what they're guaranteed, that's what they're attacking, right? Because we've already saying that they're trying to collapse the family. So they're not going after the single moms or the single dads. They're going after.
They're already where they're supposed to be. They're already where they're supposed to be.
Right, exactly. So this is right. So this is what I'm saying here is we're proving a point right here that this is what the attack is. Ultimately, if you are a 2 parent home, cover your ass, because they're coming. It doesn't matter if you're white, black, yellow, brown, red. It doesn't matter. If you have a wife and a wife and a husband in a home with those children, they are coming. So prepare yourself. I think that's a good way to start this whole, because my thing is how do we get the word out to people that aren't expecting to have, like, I didn't know the extreme of all this stuff until I had it happen to me. I had no idea about CPS and the destruction that they were causing in the family unit. I had no idea what they were, and I don't think anybody else. So the question is, how do you prepare people that don't want to be prepared because they don't think that they're a target? Well, these statistics prove that, if anything, if you are a 2 parent home, prepare yourself.
Okay, well, now, Charles, you were going to mention something about the 2 parent home of the wealthy families.
Yes.
What were you?
I have seen this over and over again. That they may obviously the members of the lower middle class are going to be easier to target because they can't fight back. I mean, that's just a simple. They're going to be more sensitive to the risk of falling from lower middle class into the poverty into the poverty level. And so they're going to be much more subject to the kind of manipulation that we're talking about. I think
That's the plan, right?
that is the plan, and it's again. I urge everyone to look up the report of Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was Assistant Secretary of Labor under Lyndon B. Johnson in 1964, and look at how basically this was predicted for the black family as well. And you know, it's got an archaic name. I think it's called the past and present of the Negro family, something like that. But it was ultimately published in March of '64, I think. And so, I mean, this like so many things, it's predictive programming. They knew what was going to happen, and they made it happen before it happened. Just like basically, I mentioned Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Huxley knew what was going to happen in 1930, and he wrote about it.
Let me play this for you guys here real quick. I'm sure that you've heard this, but let me play this for you. Let me find the right version here.
While he's looking, Charles, I want to make sure I wrote it down. The past and present of the Negro family, right?
Yes. Daniel Patrick Moynihan. It's called the Moynihan Report. That's how you'll find the most citations to it. The Atlantic
Moynihan Report.
Yeah, Moynihan Report, and the Daniel Patrick. Oh, this is Paul Harvey.
If I were the Prince of Darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions, just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing.
Huh.
When was that produced?
1965.
Wow.
Oh man, guys, we're way past our time here. Sorry about that. I didn't even realize that. Charles, what do you got anything last that you want to throw out here for us tonight to wrap this thing up?
I just remember growing up with my grandmother who listened to Paul Harvey every day, and that is such an amazing statement that he made there. And you know, I mentioned Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Another thing, I mentioned the Moynihan Report, and another thing I'd suggest that everybody read is a book also from 1964 called None Dare Call It Treason. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, by John Stormer. 1964 really was a critical year in United States history, and basically everything started to it was on its way long before then, but 1964 is a year that really marked the beginning of the final collapse. And you know, 60 years is a moment in the eyes of God, but it's a long time for us, and it's hard to remember what America was really like 60 years ago. And it's painful because we've been taught to think that black versus white is one of the biggest issues, but blacks and whites have both been targets of this credit-based, welfare-based program, which has destroyed the family and made us all slaves. It used to be that the civil rights movement was about the heritage of slavery, when basically only black people were slaves. Now we've achieved a certain kind of equality. We're all slaves, and CPS is part of exactly what was considered one of the most evil aspects of slavery, which was moving children from one family to another, breaking up families for the profit of the owners. That's where we all are these days.
Yes, sir. Amen to that. Wow. Herbert, what do you got? Anything last words tonight, buddy?
Oh, I concur with Charles, and I'm going to look up those authors and do some reading myself. And I've been around since '64, and I can think back during those days how things were, and it was like, we're being manipulated. And now I look upon what's going on in our world now. We're still being manipulated.
And
it doesn't make a difference, black or white. We as a people are being manipulated.
It's just that the tools of the internet, the tools of television, and the movies have gotten much more sophisticated.
Yes, and you mentioned about the church. What church? I mean, here I live amongst the Bible Belt where I live, and the churches are like far and few closed. I mean, they're not closed, but you see very few people. There is no such thing as blue laws. You remember the blue laws? You still have those in Louisiana?
No, are you kidding?
Okay.
There are no blue laws anywhere anymore.
That's right. Now I remember the blue laws in Georgia, and I think those are gone in Georgia. The blue laws.
When you couldn't, in the 1960s, even to have a contract signed on a Sunday might render the contract invalid.
All right.
Because of the blue laws.
Guys.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you guys very much for joining. Charles, you'll be back, right? You're going to be.
I sure will. I can't be here tomorrow, but we'll talk on Thursday, and I will certainly reserve Friday.
All right, perfect, awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Herbert. As always, you the man.
Take care, Charles.
And all right, everybody. Well, you heard it. Things aren't as like they were in 1960. White or black, I'm the CPS Punisher. Watch out. If you got a husband and a wife, CPS is coming for you. Pay attention. I'm CPS Punisher. I'm out of here.